Dad, please don't bring grandfather to Daniel's wedding. It's better if he just stays home. My father's words sliced through the quiet of the living room like a blade, cold and absolute. I stopped mid-step on the staircase, my hand gripping the railing. I hadn't meant to hear any of this. Grandfather Thomas, a 76-year-old man with silver hair and a gentle face, sat in his usual armchair by the window, the one with the faded blue fabric he'd had for 20 years. At those words, he leaned forward slowly, as if the air around him had suddenly become too heavy to sit straight in. "But it's my grandson's wedding," grandfather said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Exactly," my mother, Caroline, cut in with a sharp, practiced tone. "And that's precisely why we can't have you there embarrassing us. The Harringtons are a very prominent family. Do you understand what that means?" "I'm your father," grandfather said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. "I only want to see the boy married." "Dad." My father, Robert, stood up from the couch, voice rising. "You don't understand the importance of appearances. The Harringtons will judge everything about us. I can't afford any distractions. You'll stay home. That's my final word. If you're watching this, welcome to Whispers of Wisdom." What happened next turned our entire family inside out, and I promise you, you will not see it coming. My name is Amelia Carter. I'm 31 years old, a freelance journalist living in Seattle, Washington. This story began 4 weeks before my younger brother's wedding. My brother, Daniel, is 27. He works in corporate finance and was engaged to Sophia Harrington, the daughter of one of the city's most respected cardiologists. The Harringtons were exactly the kind of people my parents had spent their whole lives trying to impress: polished, connected, quietly powerful. But to understand how my parents could say something so heartless to my grandfather, you need to understand our family's history. My father, Robert Carter, runs a mid-sized construction firm. He always talks about building his success from nothing, about hard work and sacrifice. But the version of events he leaves out is this: 18 years ago, when his company was buried in debt after a disastrous commercial project, it was grandfather Thomas who quietly refinanced his modest home, a small brick house he'd lived in for decades, to hand my father a loan of $20,000. For a retired school principal living on a pension, that was not a small amount. That was everything. And what did my father say? I remember it. I was 13, standing outside the kitchen doorway, listening. "Only 20,000? My colleague's father gave him 200,000 without blinking. You're supposed to be my father, and this is all you can offer?" Grandfather didn't raise his voice. He didn't fight back. He just sat there, hands folded in his lap, looking at the floor. I cried into my pillow that night. My mother, Caroline, had a different issue with grandfather. She always believed he favored me over Daniel. The truth was simple: I was the only one who actually showed up. Every week, sometimes twice, I drove to grandfather's house. I brought him food: the lamb stew he loved, the almond biscuits his late wife used to bake. I sat with him for hours, listening to his stories about teaching in rural communities, about the students who'd gone on to do remarkable things, about my grandmother Eleanor, who passed away from a stroke when Daniel was only 6. Daniel called grandfather maybe 4 times a year. Usually when he needed someone to look after his dog. Once, when he needed help with a used car he was buying. But in my mother's eyes, grandfather's affection for me was unfair, a deliberate slight against her son. Every birthday gift grandfather gave me, even something as simple as a handwritten card or a jar of homemade marmalade, was cause for complaint. "Why doesn't he do something special for Daniel?" she'd ask. I tried explaining. No one listened. Then came the wedding preparations. Daniel and Sophia had planned an event for over 220 guests at the Grand Meridian Hotel, one of Seattle's most prestigious venues. Everything had to be perfect: the florals, the menu, the seating, the impression. Sophia's father, Dr. Harold Harrington, was a man of considerable reputation. Her mother, Vivian, sat on the boards of 3 charitable foundations. They were exactly the kind of family that made my parents hold their breath. And grandfather Thomas? He was a problem to be managed. 3 weeks before the wedding, I was at my parents' house helping with some of the planning when I overheard my mother and Daniel discussing the seating chart in the dining room. "We can't put grandfather at the main family table," my mother was saying, spreading papers across the table. "He won't know how to behave around people like the Harringtons." I walked in. "I'm sorry, what are you saying?" "Amelia, you don't understand social dynamics," Daniel said, barely looking up. He had adopted our parents' tone so naturally it scared me. "Sophia's family is going to be watching everything. Grandfather still wears that brown suit from 1998. You know how he gets, telling long stories, asking people to repeat themselves. It's not the image we want." I stared at my brother like I was seeing a stranger. "That's grandfather Thomas you're talking about. He refinanced his house for Dad. He raised Dad alone after Grandma died young. He spent 40 years teaching children and never asked for anything in return." "That's between him and Dad," Daniel said flatly. My father appeared in the doorway. "Amelia. Go home. This is not your concern." I was 31 years old. I had a graduate degree and paid my own rent. But in that house, I was still the child who didn't understand how the world worked. The following week, I noticed that grandfather had not received a formal wedding invitation in the mail. When he gently mentioned it to my mother during a Sunday visit, she waved it off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Dad, you live nearby. You don't need an invitation. We'll just keep you informed." But I had seen the guest list. Distant cousins from out of state had received embossed invitations. Old family friends who hadn't been to a family gathering in a decade had received them. Grandfather had not. They were quietly erasing him. 2 weeks before the wedding, the family gathered for a Sunday dinner at my parents' house, their large, newly renovated home in the East Lake neighborhood, bought after my father's company had its best year. The table was beautiful. Roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, green beans with almonds, a berry crumble for dessert. Grandfather arrived carrying a tin of his homemade shortbread, the kind Daniel used to ask for every Christmas when he was small. My mother glanced at it, barely pausing her conversation with a neighbor. "Oh, just set it on the kitchen counter, Dad. We have plenty." Grandfather set the tin down quietly and came to sit at the table. For the next 2 hours, no one spoke to him directly. The conversation swirled around the wedding, the DJ, the floral centerpieces, what Sophia's family would think of the menu, where they would all vacation for the Christmas holidays. Grandfather sat at the corner of the table, cutting his food carefully, taking small sips of water, saying nothing. I kept catching his eye and smiling. He always smiled back. After dinner, while everyone moved to the living room, I found grandfather standing on the back porch. The October air was cold. He didn't have his coat. He was looking out at the garden, the roses that had gone to sleep for the winter, the old maple tree he had helped my father plant 12 years ago. "Grandfather, come inside. You'll catch a cold." "I'm fine, my dear. Just wanted some fresh air." We stood beside each other for a long moment. The city hummed quietly in the distance. "Daniel's getting married," he said softly. "He is. And you?" He glanced at me with that warm, sideways look he had. "When will my granddaughter find someone wonderful?" I laughed softly. "I'm still figuring things out." He nodded slowly. "Take your time. But don't spend it all on work, Amelia." I did that. I was a good teacher. A good principal. But I missed things. Time moves faster than you think. He paused. "Make sure the people you love know they're loved. While there's still time to say it." Something in his voice made my chest tighten. "Grandfather, are you all right?" Before he could answer, my mother called from inside. Amelia. Can you help clear the table? I looked at him once more. He nodded toward the door. Go on. That was the last real conversation I had with him before everything changed. 1 week before the wedding, I stopped by my parents' house to pick up some documents for a story I was working on. I heard my father's voice from the living room before I even opened the door. I let myself in quietly. I've made a decision, my father was saying, his voice carrying that particular hardness I knew well. You will not be coming to the wedding. Grandfather was sitting in his usual chair. Robert. Don't. Do you understand who Harold Harrington is? Do you understand what it means for my company if he recommends us to his colleagues? 1 word from him and we land 3 major contracts. 3. And I will not, have something go wrong because of a distraction. I'm your father, Grandfather said again. There was no anger in it. Just a kind of quiet exhaustion. Then act like it and do what I ask. Stay home. End of discussion. I stepped into the room. You cannot be serious. My father turned. His face was red. Amelia. This is not your conversation. It absolutely is. You're telling your father, who gave up his home savings to save your company, that he's too embarrassing to attend his own grandson's wedding. You don't understand the pressure. I understand perfectly. My voice was shaking. You're choosing a business opportunity over your father's dignity. And you should be ashamed of that. My mother appeared from the hallway. Amelia, your father has thought this through. No. He's just decided that grandfather's feelings matter less than impressing strangers. I turned to grandfather. Grandfather, I will not go either. Not if they do this. He shook his head gently. No, Amelia. You go. Daniel is your brother. I don't want you to lose that memory because of me. But I'll be fine, my dear. He said it with such stillness. Such certainty. I will be absolutely fine. My father took my arm and steered me toward the door. Don't make a scene at the wedding. I'm asking you, stay out of it. I left. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, unable to drive. I called 2 friends. Both said some version of the same thing, choose your battles, Amelia. The wedding isn't the moment for this. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too close to it to think clearly. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way grandfather had said those words. I will be absolutely fine. There was something different in it. Not resignation. Something else. Like a decision already made. The night before the wedding, I drove to his house. A small, 2-story home in the Beacon Hill neighborhood. He'd lived there for 38 years. The lights were off. I knocked 4 times. No answer. His car was in the driveway. I told myself he'd gone to sleep early. I decided to come back in the morning. Wedding day. The Grand Meridian Hotel was exactly as beautiful and cold as I had imagined. Crystal chandeliers, white orchids on every table, staff in black uniforms moving like shadows. I wore the sage green dress I'd bought for the occasion and spent the whole morning trying to reach grandfather by phone. No answer. No answer. No answer. The ceremony was lovely. Sophia was radiant. Daniel cried at the altar, which surprised me. He was more sentimental than he let on. The Harringtons were gracious and elegant and exactly as my parents had hoped. My father worked the room expertly, and my mother laughed too loudly and smiled too brightly, the way she always did when she was performing rather than living. I sat through the reception with a knot in my stomach that refused to loosen. My father gave a speech. He thanked the Harringtons. He spoke about legacy and family. He said Daniel had become a man he was proud of. He welcomed Sophia with open arms. He did not mention grandfather Thomas once. Around 9 in the evening, as the dancing was winding down, I heard my mother say to Daniel and Sophia, "We should stop by grandfather's on the way home, actually. He really ought to give something for the occasion. It's tradition, grandparents give gifts for weddings. He must have something set aside." Daniel nodded. "He should have given me something. Cash, maybe, or something toward a house deposit." I set down my glass. "Are you listening to yourselves?" I said quietly. "He wasn't allowed to come to the wedding. He was told to stay home so he wouldn't embarrass you. And now you want to collect a gift from him?" "Amelia," my mother said, with that patient, warning tone. "No. I'm not staying quiet for this." No one responded. They turned back to their champagne. We arrived at grandfather's house just after 11. My parents, Daniel, Sophia, and me. The house was dark. I noticed immediately that something was different. The curtains in the front room, the ones with the small blue pattern that Eleanor had sewn 30 years ago, were gone. My father used his spare key. He turned on the light. The house was empty. Not empty as in no one home. Empty as in stripped. The furniture was gone. The framed photographs that had lined the hallway, grandfather and Eleanor on their wedding day, Dad as a boy, Daniel and me at various ages, gone. The bookshelves, the armchair, the old writing desk where grandfather used to grade papers long after he'd retired, all of it gone. Only a few taped boxes remained in the corner of the living room, and a single sealed envelope on the kitchen counter addressed to the family. My mother made a sound that wasn't quite a word. My father tore open the envelope and read aloud. "Dear family. By the time you read this, I will have settled into my new home at Maplewood Senior Residence in Redmond. I have sold the house and most of my belongings. This decision has been forming for some time, and I have made it with full clarity and peace of mind. The proceeds from the sale have been allocated as follows. I have prepaid 3 years of accommodation and care at Maplewood, so I will not be a financial burden to anyone. The remaining funds, $44,000, have been placed into the Elder Dignity Fund, a registered charitable organization that Amelia has been building through her nonprofit work. These funds will support programs for elderly people who are experiencing isolation and are in need of community connection. I have come to understand that I have been an inconvenience in this family for some time. I am not writing this to accuse anyone. I am writing it because I want you to know that I made this choice for myself, not in anger, but in the quiet hope that I can spend whatever time I have left in a place where I am genuinely valued. Amelia, my dear. You have been the light of my later years. You listened when no one else did. You visited, you remembered, you cared. Thank you for respecting my decision and helping me understand my options. Please don't grieve for me. I am finally, truly content. Daniel, I wish you and Sophia every happiness. I am sorry I could not be there. I hope you build a home filled with warmth and honest love. I have asked my solicitor, Mr. Gerald Marsh of Marsh & Associates, to handle any formal family matters going forward. Please respect my wishes for space. With love always. Thomas Carter. The silence that followed was absolute. Then my father crumpled the letter in his hand. He gave it to a charity fund. $44,000. That was supposed to come to us, that's part of the family estate. Wait. My mother turned to me slowly, eyes narrowing. Amelia helped him. You knew about this? I helped him understand his options, I said, my voice steady. He'd been thinking about this for months. He asked me to tour Maplewood with him last spring. He asked me to help him understand the financial contracts. I helped him because he asked me to, and because it was his house, his money, and his life. $44,000, Daniel said, voice gone flat. That could have been a deposit on a flat for Sophia and me. Something broke open in me. I need you all to hear what you're saying right now. Your grandfather, a man who spent 40 years shaping young lives, who raised Dad alone, who gave up his savings when this family needed it, has just quietly left the home he lived in for 4 decades because he felt unwanted. Because he was told, directly, that his presence at his grandson's wedding would be an embarrassment. And the first thing you can think to say is that you're sorry about the money? Amelia, my father started. No. You are going to listen. My voice cracked, but I kept going. Family is not a performance. It is not who impresses who at a wedding reception. Real family is showing up. It is remembering how someone takes their tea. It is asking about their life, their history, their dreams. Grandfather gave all of that to this family. Every single one of you. And what he got in return was silence and a locked door on his grandson's wedding day. Sophia, standing near the doorway, reached for Daniel's arm quietly. I could see she was shaken. And Daniel, do you know grandfather spent 37 years in education? Do you know he won a regional teaching award in 1987? Do you know the name of the town where he grew up, or what your grandmother Eleanor was like, or why he always kept that old photograph of a classroom in the hallway? No. Because you never asked. Not once. Daniel said nothing. I'm going to see him, I said. And if any of you try to pressure him or go through his solicitor to make demands, I will make sure he has every protection available to him. He has made his wishes clear. You will respect them. I walked out of that empty house and drove toward Redmond. Maplewood Senior Residence was not what I had imagined the first time grandfather mentioned it. Driving up, I'd expected something clinical, gray corridors, fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant. What I found was a red brick building set behind old oak trees, with lit pathways and a front garden that still held autumn color. A staff member at reception, a young woman named Helen, smiled when I asked for Thomas Carter. Oh, Mr. Thomas. He's probably in the common room. He's already made friends with half the wing. Come on through. She walked me down a warm-lit corridor where framed photographs of local landscapes hung on the walls. We passed a small library where 2 residents sat reading by a window. We passed a room where someone was playing guitar softly. We reached the common room to find grandfather sitting at a round table with 3 other residents, cards in hand, laughing at something a staff member named Joel had just said. Mr. Thomas, your granddaughter is here, Helen said. He looked up. His entire face changed, that particular light that came into his eyes when he saw me. He stood, slower than I remembered but still with dignity. Amelia. He held out both hands. I took them. I couldn't speak for a moment. Joel, grandfather said, this is my granddaughter. The journalist. The one who writes about people who've been forgotten. Joel shook my hand warmly. He talks about you every day. Said you're the only person in his family who remembered his birthday without being reminded. I pressed my lips together to hold myself steady. We found a quiet corner of the room, 2 armchairs near a window that looked out over the garden. You're not angry? Grandfather asked. No, I said. I'm sad that it came to this. But I'm not angry. You made a thoughtful decision. I was honored that you trusted me enough to help you with it. I'd been thinking about it since last winter, he said. After Christmas dinner. Do you remember? Your father spent the whole meal discussing a deal he was hoping to close. Your mother talked about a holiday she wanted to take. And no one, not once, looked at me and said, Thomas, how are you? What have you been thinking about? I sat there for 3 hours and said perhaps 6 words. He paused. That was when I understood. I had already become invisible. I didn't try to defend them. I couldn't. And then I came here for a tour, he continued, and a staff member named Rosa asked me what I had done before I retired. I said I'd been a school principal. She asked me what subject I'd started out teaching. She asked me what the most difficult part of the job was. She asked me what I was most proud of. His eyes were bright. Amelia, no one in that family had asked me a question like that in years. I cried on the drive home. Not from sadness. From relief. That someone still wanted to know. Joel appeared at the doorway. Mr. Thomas, it's almost time for the evening music session. The string quartet from the university is setting up. Grandfather looked at me. Will you stay? I wouldn't leave for anything. We walked to the gathering hall together, where perhaps 40 residents were settling into chairs. A young string quartet, students, by the look of them, was tuning by the small stage. Staff moved quietly around the room, helping people get comfortable, asking about their days, laughing at small things. It felt less like an institution and more like a gathering of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. The music began. Vivaldi. Grandfather closed his eyes almost immediately, a small, private smile on his face. I watched him and felt something settle in my chest. Not peace exactly, but something close to rightness. He was exactly where he needed to be. A week later, my family arranged a formal meeting with grandfather's solicitor, Gerald Marsh. I attended, not to support their cause, but to support his. Marsh was a composed man in his 60s, measured and precise. He had clearly seen this kind of meeting before. Mr. Thomas Carter has authorized me to be completely clear, he began. He sold his personal property of his own volition. He is a legally competent adult with full capacity. The charitable allocation and the care arrangements were both made lawfully and according to his explicit wishes. He has asked for space from the family for an indefinite period, with the exception of his granddaughter, Amelia Carter, with whom he wishes to maintain a full and open relationship. My father leaned forward. That money was part of an expected family estate. Mr. Carter, Marsh said evenly, there is no legal basis for that claim. The property was his. The decision was his. If you pursue this further through legal channels, I will advise my client to seek a formal protection order. I would strongly recommend allowing Mr. Thomas to live his life as he has chosen to. My mother sat very still. Daniel, quieter than I'd ever seen him, said almost to himself, so he really doesn't want to see us. He wants peace, I said. He's wanted it for a long time. They left without resolution, without the outcome they'd come for. And there was nothing left to pursue. The year that followed reshaped my family in ways none of us had anticipated. My father's company hit a rough period that winter. A commercial partnership dissolved unexpectedly, leaving him with a significant shortfall. There was no one to call this time, no parent to mortgage a home, no quiet loan to bridge the gap. He had to navigate it himself, downsizing the office, selling one of the family cars, restructuring loans. He did it. It took 18 difficult months, but he did it. And something in him quieted afterward. He stopped speaking quite so loudly about legacy and standing. My mother found herself with more time and less to fill it with. The social engagements that had structured her life began to feel thin. She joined a local women's reading group, then a community garden project. She began, slowly, to talk less about what things looked like and more about what they were. Daniel's first year of marriage was harder than he had expected. Sophia was serious and grounded in ways that challenged him. She wanted a partner who showed up fully, who thought about others, who planned and communicated and grew. The version of Daniel she'd married was still becoming that person. They worked at it, together, with real effort. And something happened one afternoon when Daniel was fulfilling mandatory community hours at a food distribution center. He had been cited for speeding and recklessness and assigned the hours as part of his penalty. He found himself working alongside an elderly volunteer named Frank, a retired engineer who spent 4 mornings a week at the center because, as he explained, his children lived across the country and this was where he felt useful. Do they visit? Daniel asked. At Christmas, Frank said. Sometimes Easter. Daniel was quiet for a long time. I used to think, Frank said, still sorting cans, that my job was to help my kids launch. Get them set up, get them going, and then step back. Let them live their lives. I did that. They launched beautifully. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I just didn't account for what that would feel like. When the house goes quiet and there's no one left who remembers who you used to be. Daniel didn't speak much for the rest of that shift. He drove home quietly. That evening, he called me. Tell me about grandfather, he said. Tell me things I don't know. I told him everything. About the rural school in eastern Washington where grandfather had taught for his first 8 years. About the award he'd received that he'd never once mentioned to us. About grandmother Eleanor, who had loved detective novels and grown her own tomatoes and laughed so loudly it embarrassed the family at restaurants. About how grandfather had kept teaching Sunday school for 6 years after he retired, not because anyone asked him to, but because he liked the children. Daniel was very quiet on the other end of the phone. I didn't know any of that, he said finally. I know. I never asked. No. A long pause. Can I come with you next time you visit him? Meanwhile, the Elder Dignity Fund began to grow in ways that surprised even me. I had been running a small nonprofit for 3 years, focused on community storytelling, connecting people across generations. Grandfather's gift became the foundation of something larger. We launched a volunteer matching program, connecting university students with isolated seniors for regular visits. We funded art workshops, music afternoons, and garden projects at residential facilities across the Seattle area. We partnered with libraries to run oral history projects, recording the stories of elderly residents who had never been asked to share them. I wrote about all of it. Essays, features, reported pieces. About grandfather. About the other residents I met at Maplewood and other facilities. About the man who had been a merchant sailor and could describe the coast of every continent but hadn't spoken to his son in 4 years. About the woman who had been a concert pianist and now played for her fellow residents because it was the only place anyone still came to hear her. The writing reached people. The pieces were shared widely. Messages came in from across the country, from children who recognized their own neglect in my words, from elderly people who felt for the first time that someone had spoken honestly about their experience, from care workers who said the coverage was changing how facilities were being evaluated and funded. The Oregonian, then the Atlantic, then a national public radio feature. Grandfather read every word. He was the only family member who had always read my work without being prompted. Grandfather, meanwhile, was thriving. By spring, he had started a woodworking club at Maplewood, 3 mornings a week in the craft room, teaching 6 other residents how to sand, join, and finish small pieces of furniture. He grew tomatoes and courgettes in the raised bed the facility had given him. He attended every concert, every film night, every communal dinner. He had a small group of close friends, Margaret, a retired librarian, Robert, a former air traffic controller, and a sharp-witted woman named Iris who had once been a civil rights lawyer and still argued fiercely about everything. When I visited, I often found him mid-conversation, mid-laughter, mid-something. He looked well-fed and rested. His eyes had a clarity I hadn't seen in years. You know what I've realized, he said to me one afternoon. We were walking the garden path, stopping to check on his tomato plants. Tell me. I spent a very long time trying to earn love. Trying to be useful enough, quiet enough, undemanding enough. Trying not to take up too much space. He touched one of the green tomatoes gently. But love isn't something you earn. The kind that requires you to keep earning it, that isn't love at all. It's a contract. And I kept my side of it for too long. He straightened up. Here, people simply like me. They like my stories. They like that I can teach them to sand wood. They like that I remember their birthdays. He smiled. It's so much simpler than I made it for myself. Daniel came with me on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after his phone call. He arrived at Maplewood carrying a tin of homemade shortbread. He'd called me the night before to ask if grandfather still liked it. He'd found an old recipe online and made 2 batches, throwing out the first because the edges burned. We walked in together. Grandfather was in the common room reading. Daniel stopped in the doorway. He looked very young suddenly, in the way people do when they're frightened. "Do you want me to go in first?" I asked. "No," he said. "This one is mine." He walked in. Grandfather looked up. Daniel set the tin on the side table. He sat down in the chair across from grandfather and leaned forward, elbows on knees, the way he used to sit when he was small and had done something wrong and didn't yet know how to say it. "Grandfather," he said, and his voice broke on the word. "I'm sorry. I am so deeply, completely sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that I finally understand. I understand what I took from you and never gave back." Grandfather looked at him for a long moment. His expression was very still. Then he reached out and put his hand over Daniel's. "Come here, son." They held each other for a long time, both crying. Joel stepped quietly out of the room and gave them space. Sophia came the following month. She sat with grandfather for 2 hours, asking him about Eleanor, about teaching, about what he hoped the Elder Dignity Fund would eventually become. She had ideas of her own. She'd been speaking to a colleague about intergenerational housing models in the Netherlands, about research on loneliness as a public health issue. Grandfather listened with complete attention and asked 7 careful questions. "She's exactly right for Daniel," he told me afterward. "She sees things. She actually sees them." My parents took longer. The first visit, 8 months after the wedding night, was strained and tearful and awkward in every direction. My mother apologized and couldn't quite find the words she wanted. My father apologized and then got part way through explaining his reasoning before catching himself and stopping. Grandfather listened to all of it. He didn't rush them. He didn't offer easy absolution. But he forgave them. Not because the hurt had dissolved. Not because they had fully understood. But because, as he told me privately afterward, forgiveness is something you do for yourself. It is the decision to stop carrying a weight that was never yours to carry. "Besides," he said, with that quiet half-smile, "I have too many good things happening here to spend energy on resentment. Margaret and I are learning watercolor. Robert is teaching me chess properly. And Iris has been recommending books that are genuinely changing how I see things." He looked at me. "I don't have time to be unhappy, Amelia. I have things to do." 2.5 years after that wedding night, the Elder Dignity Fund had supported programs in 11 facilities across Washington state, connected over 300 volunteers with isolated seniors, funded 12 oral history projects, and provided grants to 46 elderly individuals who wanted to pursue hobbies, education, or creative work they'd put aside for too long. Every program bore grandfather's fingerprints, his insistence that the goal was not charity but dignity, not pity but genuine connection. That elderly people were not problems to be managed but stories to be heard, wisdom to be sought, lives still fully in motion. I gave a talk at a regional nonprofit conference that spring. I told grandfather's story, with his permission, in full. Afterward, a woman in the front row, perhaps 60, professional, composed, approached me. She said she hadn't called her father in 3 weeks and didn't entirely know why. "What should I do?" she asked. "Call him today," I said. "Ask him something real. Ask him what he was proudest of, or what he's been thinking about lately, or what he would have done differently. And then listen. Really listen." She nodded. I don't know what she did after that. But I hope. On grandfather's 78th birthday, we had a small party in the Maplewood garden. His friends from the residence, Joel and Helen from the staff, Daniel and Sophia, my parents, and me. Someone brought a guitar. Margaret brought a cake she'd baked in the facility kitchen with Iris's instructions and Robert's cheerful interference. Grandfather sat at the center of it all, not performing for anyone, not trying to earn his place at the table. Just there. Just himself. Laughing at something Iris said. Holding Sophia's hand for a moment when she leaned over to tell him something. Catching my eye across the garden with that particular look that meant everything was, against all odds, all right. Later, as the afternoon light turned golden and people began to drift inside, Grandfather and I sat alone for a few minutes beside his tomato plants, which had done spectacularly that season. "You know what the strangest part is," he said. "Tell me." "I feel more known here than I have in 30 years. He was quiet for a moment. "Eleanor used to know me completely. Every part of me. After she was gone, I thought that was the end of being truly known. That you had one person who saw all of you, and when that person was gone, you just carried the rest alone." He turned to me. "But that's not true, Amelia. I was wrong about that. You can be known again. You can begin again. Even at 78, with a garden plot and a tin of shortbread and a woodworking class on Tuesday mornings." He looked at the tomatoes, then back at me. "Plant things," he said. "Even when you're not sure how much time you have. Plant things and wait and tend to them. That's all any of us are really doing, isn't it?" I reached over and took his hand. "Yes," I thought. "That's exactly what we're doing." So I'll ask you now, the question I've been sitting with since all of this began. If you had been in my place, watching someone you love become invisible in his own family, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up, even knowing it would cost you? Would you have helped him find his own way out? Or would you have stayed quiet and hoped things would change on their own? Leave your thoughts below. I'd love to hear from you. And if this story moved you in any way, I hope you'll carry this with you. The people in your life who seem quietest are often the ones with the most to say. Ask them. Listen. It costs nothing and it means everything. Thank you for being here with us at Whispers of Wisdom. Until next time, take care of each other. Real family isn't only those you're born to. It's those who choose to truly see you, and those you choose to truly see in return.